Good morning and welcome to episode 36 of the Jacksonian. As I am yours truly, Jackson Johnson, and I have with me is the host of From the Hawkeye the Storm and the co-host of Hawkeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football on the Iowa channel, Cory Brada, as we'll be going over our take on what's going on with Iowa football, Iowa men's basketball, and the impact that Caitlin Clark has had on women's basketball, not just in college, but in the WNBA. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, there's been it's been about as busy of a May to June, if you want to count what's going on with Caitlin as it relates to Hawkeye sports in the history of at least my life following the sport. Usually, this is the slow time of year, but Hawkeye fans have flocked over to the WNBA, and people are, of course, obsessed with the transfer portal and recruiting. So, and of course, the football season is right around the corner. So, yeah, lots to talk about now. 12 months out of the year.
Well, I will say though, it's going to be a wild ride. And before we start the show, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my platform is from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Work closely with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. My background's in AM FM radio. Did a little of that when I was out of school, and kind of got out of broadcasting for quite some time. This is not my full time job. For people that wonder that, I've had to answer that question a number of times. So yeah, I'm kind of a jack of several trades, but I love Iowa sports and love talking to people about Iowa sports and having a microphone in front of my face. And the camera is was a little new when I first started this venture a few years ago, but as you found, Jackson, you get used to it, and if it's something you enjoy doing and enjoy talking about, it makes it a lot easier.
Agreed. You got to do what you love. That is for sure. And I wanted to go over a little bit to start off the show. I noticed that a lot of people have talked about women's basketball with the rise of Caitlin Clark, and I'll be honest, I'm kind of a moron about it. I do my best watching the sport, but she's had quite an impact. Some have said it's like Tiger Woods on golf. Um, what's your take on Caitlin Clark for the WNBA and women's basketball? And what was your take on the 2023-2024 season for Iowa for the women's team?
Yeah, obviously historic. I mean, we were just talking about this last night because I'm a big Dallas Mavericks fan, so I have unfortunately watched my team lose in the NBA Finals. But 2 straight years of Iowa women's basketball making the national championship game. It's amazing, and I don't know. Will we ever see that again? Probably not. I mean, we probably won't see a team go to back-to-back Iowa team going to back-to-back national championship games. And obviously, Caitlin Clark was a big part of that. We see Kate Martin, who's really taken the world by storm, at least the Las Vegas Aces team by storm. It's amazing how many minutes she's playing. So, yeah, it's been an unbelievable ride. I'm sure a lot of Hawkeye fans would say, hey, it'd be great to have at least one national title in 2 trips to the championship game. But Caitlin has changed the sport. Now we'll see long term the impact on the WNBA. I know the big narrative out there, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but the idea that the NBA has had to hold up that league for so long financially, that's a hole that the WNBA is still looking to climb out of, and so she's helping. I mean, she's bringing attention to the sport, no question. I haven't looked at viewership numbers. I'll be curious to look at those numbers, especially after the season's over. Um, I have my own opinion on when the season starts. When it ends, I don't like the fact that it starts when the NBA is still going. But at the same time, I don't like the fact that it goes into the college football season. I just think it distracts a lot of people, and I mean that's you can only have so many sports, kind of be the focal point. And so it is what it is. Hopefully, they can really capitalize on these next few months where really all we got is regular season baseball in the MLB. You've got Stanley Cup winding down. You've got golf and a few other things. But yeah, Caitlin's drawn a lot of attention to the sport. There's been a lot of controversy. It seems like she's not the one creating the controversy, but it kind of follows her around. And that's, I guess, what happens with great players. But as it relates to your comparison at the outset, I understand the illustration Tiger to Caitlyn. The difference with Tiger is it lasted for so long and he had so much championship success. Now it's a different sport; it's an individual sport. We're talking about golf, but can Caitlyn lead the Fever to not only the playoffs but make a run? They've been the worst team in that league for several years now, and I think if the playoffs started today, I saw that they would be in somehow. So you give yourself a chance if you get in, but that team is not great. Let's just say that. So it may take some time, but she has certainly brought a lot to the Fever and a lot to the sport early.
Well, and I looked at the attendance numbers the other day, and this is something I saw on Twitter from Patrick Bet David on Valuetainment and the Patrick Bet David podcast. He mentioned that the WNBA average attendance is 7,645 people per game. Angel Reese average attendance is 10,365 per game. And Caitlin Clark average attendance is 15,142 people per game. What's your take on these attendance numbers?
Well, trending in the right direction. I'll say this. Angel Reese has been at the forefront of some of this controversy. She got called for a flagrant one the other night on a big hit on Caitlin Clark. Was she going for the ball? Was she not? I mean, I know a good friend of mine, Kasheen Alexander, who's a former Iowa women's basketball star. She told me in a message that, hey, it looks like Angel's looking at the ball on that play. I look at it and I'm like, well, that's quite a windup, quite a follow through. But as it relates to the impact Reese has had, I don't quite know where that stems from, other than, this is going to be controversial when I say this, so maybe I can get away with it on your platform. I don't quite know where her the attention, like people wanting to go see her play, comes from, other than she is a very, very controversial, polarizing figure when she's behind a podium. She's a social media influencer. But, I mean, like, as far as the game is concerned, what was she, the 7th overall pick? She has not evolutionized the game. I want to make that very clear. Like, as it relates to the game, Caitlin Clark has changed the game. Angel Reese has brought attention to the sport, okay? But Angel Reese does not play in a way that I believe makes people flock to want to see her play. Now, those attendance numbers are what they are. And again, why that is specifically, I don't know. I do think it's, part of that is the Sky are an intriguing team as a whole. I don't think we can give all the credit to Angel Reese. It helps having a top 10 overall draft pick, and I'm not taking her talent or her impact on that team away from her. But I do think the disparity between what we're seeing from a worse team in the Fever with Caitlin Clark and a better team in the Sky with Angel Reese is exactly kind of what I'm talking about. I think the game has been impacted so much more by Caitlin, the way she plays, her range from outside, her vision. Angel Reese rebounds the ball pretty well. She can score in different places, but there's a lot of great WNBA players, Jackson. I haven't watched the sport a lot before this year, but there's a lot of great players in the WNBA that can do everything Angel Reese does and more. So maybe that's going to sound controversial. I'm not trying to make it sound that way, but that's what it is. And there's a reason she was not the 2nd overall pick. It's not like it was 1A and 1B. No, she was the 7th overall pick in the WNBA draft.
Well, I'll definitely have to make sure I keep an eye on it as much as possible. And I saw where Robert Griffin III the other day was talking about Aja Wilson. He's like, well, what about her? What about Aja Wilson?
She's unbelievable. Yeah, she's unbelievable. That's what I say. She's a perfect example of Aja Wilson is. She is. When you look at the makeup of the WNBA, and you look at how Caitlin Clark plays, how Angel Reese plays. First of all, it's amazing. I saw the numbers last night from Caitlin: the number of assists, number of rebounds, number of points, so many games into a rookie career, and she set all kinds of records already. But when you look at someone like Aja Wilson, she's doing it night after night after night. And it's funny because we had a show with Kasheen not that long ago, and had some Hawkeye fans chiming in about. I remember one specific Hawkeye fan said something along the lines of, "Well, Caitlin's going to take an adjustment period because, these aren't her old teammates." And I'm like, "Yeah, they're not. They're much, much better. we have to remember that everybody in this league is the best of the best. And I compare it to um, kind of the fan. I don't know if it's just ignorance or if it's just living in the moment or living, with your Hawkeye color glasses on. But Jackson, you remember when the Jaguars were so bad, and
Oh
that was
man.
during the same stretch of time where Alabama was rattling off national championship after national championship, and the narrative out there was, well, maybe Alabama could beat the Jaguars. Like, it's what a stupid comment to make when you really think about the makeup of these teams. And I kind of feel the same way about like what we're seeing with Caitlin Clark. She's surrounded by so much better talent. Is the chemistry there yet? No, of course not. And they're also going up against better competition. People like Asia Wilson, night in and night out. Alyssa Thomas. I mean, this Kennedy Carter gal that sparked so much controversy. I kind of took a shot at her because she is not the player that Caitlin is, or the player with that deserves the attention that she does. But she was still, I think, a top 5 overall pick in the WME draft a few years ago. So these are the best of the best, and each night you're going to be going up against that. So Caitlin is out. In my opinion, she's exceeded expectations, but my expectations were not as high as some people's.
Well, I am curious to see who's going to be that replacement for Caitlin Clark in Iowa women's basketball. I've heard the name Lucy. Is it Lucy Olson? Did I get her name right?
Yeah, Villanova transfer. She was the third leading scorer in the country in Division I last year. She can fill it up. So she's not Caitlin Clark. She doesn't play like Caitlin Clark, but she does have some attributes. I don't think she probably has the vision of Caitlin. I haven't seen her in an Iowa uniform yet, but she can shoot it from outside. She's got pretty good range, good handles. She's a good passer. I don't want to call her a poor woman's version of Caitlin Clark, but they needed somebody that could take over the role of ball handler and scorer, and hopefully someone they can rely on late in games. Because I think that's maybe my biggest question now is who do you turn to? They lost not just Caitlin Clark, but a nucleus of older players, all of which had the ball in their hands late. Now usually that was Caitlin Clark in a moment where they needed a bucket, but Kate Martin made big shots in her career late in games. I was at the Iowa State Cyhawk game in Ames here last December, and Iowa was ice cold. Kate Martin hit a big 3 from the corner, and now she's having a pretty good start to her rookie season with the Aces. Gabby Marshall is long gone. Molly Davis is long gone. She just saw her. She's been hired on to the Evansville staff as a GA. So like, who's gonna have the ball late and be, not only someone who can make a shot but direct things and lead. People are talking about Caitlin's departure, but how about Lisa Bluter, the head coach? I mean, she's walked away. One of her right hand women, Patty Fitzgerald, Jenny Fitzgerald, walked away as well. So boy, a lot of veteran leadership, not just from a player perspective, from a coach's perspective. So Lucy will come in, probably be their leading scorer, and hopefully develop really good chemistry with Hannah Stolke, who could end up being the heir apparent to Caitlin as it relates to leadership of this team. Like I said, I think maybe that's going to be a joint effort with her and Lucy, but with Lucy just joining. And then they got some young players. I mean, Taylor McCabe is a trendy name. People like her. She struggled on defense, but I think she's the all-time leading 3-point maker in the state of Nebraska, high school Nebraska history. So she can fill it up. They've got some young bigs that have not quite developed. Addison O'Grady being one, AJ Edgar being another. They got a really young, they got 4 or 5 freshmen coming in, all of which are really talented. So how many of those freshmen play? So yeah, it's going to be an intriguing season. But Lucy's going to have to come in and probably average 20 for Iowa to get, I think, have a chance to get back to the Sweet 16, maybe even get to the NCAA tournament. Now, maybe she can split scoring with Hannah Stolke. Maybe one averages 15, the other averages 15. They get to the tournament that way, especially if you get some production from those other players. Sydney Falter's one I didn't mention who could be poised for a breakout year. But I think to get to the second weekend, you're probably going to look at a 20-point-per-game average from Lucy Olson.
Well, and you just mentioned Lisa Boulder has retired, and now that Jan Jensen's going to be the Nets head coach, How will that turn out in the long term?
Well, Jan's been with Lisa forever. Jan is a mastermind, as was Jenny Fitzgerald in her own right, as was Lisa Bluter in her own right. I think they all brought something different to the table. I'm not so concerned with Jan Jensen taking over. One thing being she's got the endorsement of every recruit that was committed to play for Lisa Bluter. So every freshman player, they've got Addison Deal, who's a 5-star in 2025, who has since reinforced her pledge. Now, things can change, especially with people that far out. I mean, she could flip to someone else and sign somewhere else, but I don't expect that to happen. Lucy Olson stuck with her commitment after Lisa walked away. Everybody loves Jan, and Jan is known to be kind of a post whisperer, which they need help up at the 5. So, Jan, there's going to be a lot of similarities with what you see on the court between the Lisa Bluter era and the Jan Jensen era. I don't know how many years Jan's got left in her. I think she's in her 50s, I think. But I think, like I say, I think the Jenny Fitzgerald departure is just, I don't want to say just as big as Lisa, but it's just another hole to fill. I think the bigger question is who's going to come with Jan. So now with Lisa and with Jenny gone, Raina Harmon is an assistant coach who's been with the team several years, but can she step up and produce the way Lisa's assistants did for so long? Abby Stamp is another one that actually played with Kashina Alexander. She's been with this program for quite some time now, but there's more of an onus on her. Tania Davis, former Iowa point guard, who's been on the roster, on the staff for exactly, I think, 1 year. She's someone who is now there's going to be a greater onus. So opportunity for those assistant coaches, but it's been a collective effort, Jackson, as it relates to the staff and leadership of this program for a long time. So that's my bigger question. It's not so much the head honcho, but what kind of a staff is Jan able to, I don't know, say build, because I think for the most part she's got her nucleus there, but how much production can she get out of everybody?
Well, I'm glad to see that the recruits love her. So I mean that's a win right there. I mean, when you got all the recruits say, "Hey, I want to be with you," that's a win right there.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of these, I don't know, I'm not aware of any of these recruits that knew that Lisa was walking away, but when they have committed to Iowa, they're committing to Lisa and Jan. Because Jan's had opportunities to go other places too. That's people need to realize, and she stuck it out. So my guess is that she knew this was coming. Her and Lisa are very close. Maybe she didn't know it was coming right when it came, but she's stuck it out. She's paid her dues, and this was the best option. I mean, when Lisa retired, it was like, okay, Jan's going to take over, and I think it was like 25 minutes later that the university announced that. So yeah, I'm happy for her and opportunity. Maybe it'll be curious to see how things do look different to some extent. Did I lose you, Jackson? Appears that I'm still alive and Jackson's not with us anymore. So
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
you're totally good. I hung out for a minute and I'm like, well, I think my internet's okay. So it happens. It's happened to me before.
Well, I will say though, if we got some outtakes coming soon, this is definitely gonna be one of them.
There you go. Blooper
Internet
reel.
cut out. So
Yep.
it's like it was like I called my IT guy this morning. And I was like, I think we got some problems here.
There you go. Put
It's
it on
like,
him.
oh, exactly. Oh man, yeah, because my dad's the IT guy of this show, and it's like, thank God for him. Oh man,
Absolutely.
oh man, what were we talking about before the internet interrupted
We
us?
were talking about we were talking about Lisa and we were talking about Jan Jensen and just how the program moves forward, the recruits that have endorsed Jan, and like I said before, it's the whatever Jan's able to do with this staff. How much is she able to get out of these young assistant coaches? I think that will be have the biggest impact on the immediate future of this program. They got a chance to ride some momentum, Jackson. 2 straight national championship appearances. That's riding momentum. So
Yeah.
in a way, Lisa's going out almost on the top. That's about as high as you could possibly imagine for an Iowa program, and so that should help the transition as well.
I hate that they didn't win it all, but you know, maybe they can win it all in 2024, 2025. So I mean, we'll see what happens.
That would be something. Without Caitlin Clark, without that nucleus they had, that would be unbelievable. I don't expect that to happen. I think the goal should be to get to the second weekend. Now you got to get to the tournament before you get to the second weekend. You got to win the first game before you get to the second game. But I think that's more of a reasonable goal. I think depending on who comes along at the 5, and then Sydney Falter, Hannah Stolke, their advancement along with Lucy Olson's fit, they got a chance to do that. Paige Beckers is coming back at UConn, so that is a challenge. That team is probably going to be right there with South Carolina and the typical core there at the top.
Well, I will say though, I am kind of curious about where the men's basketball program is going because I know the 2023-2024 season ended in a loss in the NIT. It was just kind of a mess season, I guess. But what's going on with Fran McCaffrey and the men's basketball team?
Well, that's a good question. They got Peyton Sandfort back. So if you're a Hawkeye basketball fan, that's good news because he tested the WNBA, the NBA waters, and he was a trendy name in late of the first round. As crazy as that seems to some people, it's a weak draft class. But he opts to come back. I think that was a good decision for him. Maybe he would have gotten drafted late in the first, and that's hard to turn down. However, I think he would have struggled to make a roster. He doesn't defend very well. He's very long, but lateral quickness is not great for him. I think to make it to the NBA, he's got to figure out a way to use his length better, become a more dominant rebounder, and make threes more consistently. He can light it up, but he's very streaky. So him being back helps Iowa in 24-25. Tony Perkins transferring out hurt. I wish the best for Tony. He was with the program 4 years. I do think his style of play fits more into maybe a defensive-minded team, and stylistically is just maybe not what you would typically envision for a Fran player. But I loved Tony Perkins, loved watching him play. They're going to have to figure out a way to replace his production and his, as a starter. They got to replace that spot. Desante Bowen's another point guard that left. So the guard position, there's some opportunity there for people like Brock Harding to come along. And they're bringing in a couple of really skilled players from high school, neither of which are guards. One being Cooper Koch, son of former Hawkeye great J.R. Koch, and then the other being Chris Tajo, who's an NBA Academy kid from, I think, Latin America. So those guys will help. I think they'll both play right away as freshmen is my hunch. And then they bring in a couple of transfers, one being much-needed point guard out of Morehead State, and then the other being a kid from Manhattan who's an athletic freak, kind of similar to Tajo as it relates to skill set. So they're going to be more athletic than they have in the past, even though they lost Tony Perkins. I would have loved to have seen Tony along with this new core. But if Peyton Sandfort can lead, as he did this past season, but do so in a way that's more consistent on the court. 3-point production maybe a little bit better. He's got to figure out a way to defend better. And I don't have a lot of confidence that that will happen simply because he's playing in the Fran system, and Fran doesn't seem to really value on-ball defense. But if you could get slightly better production from him on the defensive end, that would help. I think they're a tournament team. I mean, they go to the NIT last year. I think with the additions they have and the young guys coming back, guys like Josh Dix, guys like Owen Freeman, who was freshman of the year in the Big Ten, they're a tournament team. And it's probably tournament or bust for Fran. I mean, you don't get as long of a leash as you used to. And with the guys coming back, Fran has had some failures in the transfer portal over the last few seasons. He's gotten some diamonds in the rough, but he's got to make the tournament this year. And if you don't, I could see him walking away. Here's the other thing about it. Patrick McCaffrey left. Jack McCaffrey, his youngest, who's still in high school, sounds like he wants to play somewhere other than Iowa. That has created some buzz and some controversy, some speculation regarding how long Fran plans on being here. And I've even been part of that. I think it's likely Fran's gone here in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't know that we're going to get much more out of him. If he's here in 2028, I'll be surprised. He may walk away after this next season. I mean, especially if you lose some of the guys they're going to lose, like a Peyton Sandfort. Owen Freeman's not going to leave after his second year, but how does Josh Dix play? I think Josh Dix is a guy who could, if he has a really good year, could start to get on some late second round draft boards. He's not the biggest, but his ability to defend in the man-to-man and make threes, 3-and-D game now in the NBA is where it's at. That's what I always hear. I was reading up on the Mavs last night after they lost, and I was like, well, it'd be nice to get another 3-and-D guy. That seems to be the calling card for some of these younger, less athletic players. If you can play defense, Sam Hauser's a great example of that. If people have been watching the Celtics, he was at one time an Iowa recruit, transferred, I think, he transferred from Marquette, and then I think he ended up at Virginia under Tony Bennett. But if you can defend, all right, and make threes at a high clip, you got a chance to play in the league. And so, that's the one thing for these less athletic players. But we'll see with Fran. I think he's probably going to be here 2 to 3 more years and then leave, and Jack will play somewhere and he'll go watch him play. But it should be a tournament year this year, I think, if they hit expectations.
Well, things don't work out for Coach Fran McCaffrey. I bet he's got a spot waiting for him from the Hawkeye of the Storm.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to have Fran. Yeah, I'm sure Fran wants to get into broadcasting. That seems – here's the thing about Fran. There's a lot of coaches, as you know, even Bob Knight got into broadcasting after his career. Fran is like the least likely to ever do anything in broadcasting, at least in my opinion, given his personality. I could be wrong. Bob Knight was kind of a strange one. Jim Calhoun's another one that got into broadcasting for a while. But Fran is a very intelligent individual. I mean, he's a very good head coach. I think people sometimes get a little bit, especially non-Iowa fans, get a little bit caught up with his meltdowns and his blow-ups at the officials. He's a brilliant offensive-minded coach. I think if there's one, I mean, he's going to go down as one of the best Iowa men's basketball coaches in the history of the program. I know some fans from the 80s, 90s, and even earlier maybe resent that a little bit, but it is what it is. He's right there with Tom Davis. I do think the one thing about Fran is his biggest mark against him is his decision, and I call it that because that's what it is, his decision to not embrace getting better on the defensive end. And that could have been through a coaching hire. He's had opportunities. Staff members have taken jobs elsewhere, and he's decided to not bring in a guy who's defensive minded. I always bring up what Boeheim did at Michigan back in the day. Brought in the best defensive minded coach he could find from Northern Illinois, and what'd they do? They went to the Final Four, I think, the year after. Fran has been a little stubborn in his thinking, and they're perennially right there on the bubble or above, but they failed to make the second weekend under Fran. He's been here since 2010. So maybe that changes in 24-25, but you got to play defense at some point. And I think that'd be my biggest would certainly be my biggest criticism against Fran. He's not the warmest and cuddliest either. I mean, he's a little rough around the edges. He's a nice guy, but um, yeah, he'll go down regardless of when he walks away. He'll go down as kind of a polarizing figure as well.
Well, I will say stubbornness will chew you up like a chicken nugget for sure. And our friend Joey Foster gives us a friendly howdy, and he's got a question for us. What kind of production does Corey expect out of Luke Lackey this year? May have been answered already since I'm like, no worries, man. Uh, you probably missed a little bit of the internet doing the mess around with us.
Yeah, I mean, Luke's gonna have a chance now with Eric all being gone, and hopefully Luke is fully healthy. I think he is. He's gonna have a huge year. I mean, assuming he stays healthy, assuming Cade McNamara stays healthy. Now Iowa's in a better position at the quarterback spot as it relates to depth with Brendan Sullivan coming in from Northwestern. But numbers wise, that's hard for me to say. I mean, go back and look at some of the numbers from Noah Fant and T.J. Hawkinson. Those guys together were unbelievable. So I mean, what could Luke Lachey do by himself? He has got a talented young group, very green group of tight ends behind him. Addison Estringa, Hayden Large, Zach Ortworth. They got some freshmen this year, Gavin Hoffman, Michael Burt, who are really got a lot of potential. But if that offense is going to take a step forward, Luke Lachey is going to be at the forefront. We also don't know exactly what it's going to look like with Tim Lester at the helm as the OC. I mean, they're going to keep tight end involvement as a heavy part of that offense and that attack, as they should. But you just don't know how much. What does Tim Lester's what does the addition of Tim Lester to the program do to actual tight end production? I don't have an answer to that, but Luke Lachey's got a chance to be the best tight end in the league and maybe one of the best tight ends in the country. That would be a good conversation for Mark Rogers. I'll have to bring that up this evening when we do our weekly show. I'd be curious to get his perspective on maybe top 5 tight ends going into the season. I'd have to think Luke Lachey is on that list, but I don't know. Again, if this offense is going to take a step forward, he's going to have to be a big part of it.
Well, I've always said that if anybody is tight end it's the University of Iowa. Because, I mean, we've seen that with Hawkinson and Georgia the Jungle Kittle and, plenty of other guys. And Joey Foster has another question. John Nestor looks undersized to me. Is he undersized? I'm not sure of his weight and height.
John Nestor, that's an interesting comment. What is John? I don't think he's undersized. I guess I could look up his weight and height. He's a guy who Iowa really likes. I think he's probably going to be playing corner, and corner is a position where guys typically seem to go down during the season. Yeah, John Nestor is listed at he's listed at 5'11". I was thinking he was closer to 6 foot. 5'11", 196. I mean, he's a corner. So if he was playing safety, maybe I'd argue that he's a little undersized. But and Iowa, it seems like corners have gotten a little longer over the years. Length has seemed to be I don't know if it's just Iowa or just around the board, across the board, maybe a little bit more important. You don't see as many Desmond King types who are 5'9", 5'10". But Nestor's a guy they really like. Chicago kid. Comes from the same area as Hawkeye star Sebastian Castro, but he's going to have players in front of him, right? So Cooper DeJean leaves, but you return Jamari Harris, you return Deshaun Lee, who kind of had a head start on John Nestor. But again, opportunity knocks that position because guys typically get hurt. That's just reputation each and every year. So he's going to be an important part of that defense, the back end. And I'm sure Phil Parker will have him. I mean, Phil Parker is the best in the business, coming off a Broyles Award win. So, guys like John Nestor could be a bigger part of this defense than people expect. His, second year in the program.
I wonder how long Ferentz has got. Because, I mean, if Nick Saban was like, I'm out of here, man. And Dabo Swinney has made it clear he's not too satisfied with the transfer portal and all of college football. And I'm not sure how Kirk Ferentz has felt about it. He's just been kind of meh about it. But how long do we see him coaching in college football? And does Phil Parker come with
Hmm.
Kirk Ferentz, or does he stay behind like Bud Foster did for a couple of years?
Yeah, or like Jan Jensen has done for Iowa women's basketball. Um, I think first of all, first question about Kirk. He's contracted through 2029. Um, I don't think he. I think it's safer to say I'm confident that he does not like the conference expansion. He does not like the transfer portal. He does not like NIL. Now he's survived these first couple of years because he's got great support from donors. He's got a good collective backing him in the Swarm. Um, the schedule gets a lot tougher next year. Now, I said that last year. I said the schedule's going to get a lot tougher next year because of the new Big Ten. They got about as favorable as a draw as one could imagine in the new Big Ten. So it's going to be harder than last season, but the schedule is favorable in that they avoid USC, they avoid Michigan, and
They avoid Oregon.
they avoid Oregon and they avoid Penn State. So you get Ohio State on the road, which is going to obviously be really difficult. But then your two games against West Coast opponents are a Washington team that lost almost everything and a UCLA team that made one of the stranger head coaching hires that I can remember in college football recent history. So very favorable schedule from that perspective. I think they have a chance to make a run at 9 or 10 wins. If they do that, Jackson, if they win 10 games, they're in the playoff conversation. That could potentially be a year where he hangs it up. I could see that, especially if Tim Lester comes in, and the offense isn't going to be top 20, top 30, but if they can get back to even top 80, that would be a huge step in the right direction. They've been bottom of the barrel in the FBS over the last 3 years. If they could do that with Tim Lester, maybe he walks away. And as it relates to Phil Parker, I know a lot of people think that Phil's not interested in being a head coach. I don't think it's quite the same situation as the Jan Jensen hire, but you've gotta offer him the job. I think if Fran or if Kirk walks away after this season, you look at Phil, say, hey, how many years do you got? What do you need? What can we put around you? We you deserve this. We appreciate you staying here as long as you did. He's had opportunities to go other places, and he's stuck put. So. Yeah, I mean the Kirk Ferentz one is interesting because again his contract goes through 29. I think a lot of money in that contract. He's the dean of college football, longest tenured coach in the FBS, and he's got a pretty favorable schedule. And with the expanded playoff, I think 10 wins might get you in. Frankly, they ain't winning a Big Ten title. All right, they're not winning,
Yeah.
they're not winning a Big Ten title, but you don't have to anymore. That is not the goal anymore. Maybe Kirk is still going to profess that to be the goal, but the goal now is can you get to 9 to 10 wins and get yourself in a position to maybe make that top 12? As it relates to Joey's question here, second and third teamers on defense that stand out. Well, you mentioned John Nestor at corner. I think at linebacker, they're really deep there. Carson Shire's a young guy who's been hurt a lot. He's going to be about as strong of a backup as you could imagine, assuming he stays healthy at linebacker, because they bring back Jay Higgins, they bring back Nick Jackson and Kyler Fisher. And then I think there's opportunity on the defensive line. Some young guys that, they lost Ontario Thompson, transferred out, kind of a weird decision for him to transfer out, goes to Western Michigan over in the MAC. So they've got some opportunity there, losing Logan Lee and Joe Evans, Noah Shannon. Those guys are done. But yeah, I mean, I think the best second and third teamers would probably be, John Nestor, Cohen Intringer at safety is a trendy name. People love that name. And then, Carson Shire, maybe even a Jaden Harrell. Heard good things from Kirk Ferentz on Jaden at linebacker. And I don't know, man. I'd have to study the roster and watch fall camp a little bit more before I gave you an answer about the defensive line. I think there's a lot of opportunity there because they like to play 8 to 9 guys.
Well, and as you said, the schedule's pretty easy. Washington, they're just rebuilding, especially with a new head coach and a new roster just all around them. Especially when they got to go to Cadet Stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. and you're going to get what I like is that you've got UCLA down in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl in November. That'll be a nice
Oh,
little.
there's no home field advantage there.
Well, I just like the hey, go play in the warm weather for a little bit because once you hit November, it starts to get pretty nippy usually in Iowa. So I don't know the last time Iowa's played somewhere that far south in the regular season or that warm in the regular season in November. So, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it an easy schedule. It's a manageable schedule, and again, comparative to the rest of the conference, obviously Big Ten, SEC, 1A, 1B right now as it relates to
Oh,
the current makeup of the two conferences. So comparative to every team, I think I've not studied every team's schedule, but again, you're going to play a couple of those teams out west, and if there's two teams that I don't want to play from out west, that's Oregon and USC, and they avoided both.
yeah, I would hate to be going up against Miller Moss because all he's got to do is take advantage of the Iowa defense, and Iowa's in trouble if they're going against USC. And Joey's got a question for you. Do you expect there to be a battle at Maryland this year?
I'm curious to see who their quarterback is. I mean, I would love to be able to talk to a Terps expert because I don't know who their quarterback is. It seems like Tagovailoa has been there forever. I don't even remember who their quarterback was before Talia. So I'm sure they have the answer to that, and I'm just naive to it. But maybe. I mean, one of the big storylines is you got Brian Ferentz, who's now on the staff there as an analyst. I think it's probably a nice thing for Maryland that they don't have to come to Iowa City with that hire, but Iowa goes there. So yeah, I mean, late November. When's the last time Iowa played Maryland? Second to last game of the season, I think. Was that it was right before the Nebraska game. So um,
Yeah.
depending on quarterback, yeah, it's gonna be a challenge. Maryland, they seem to score a lot of points. Although, look at recent history. Look at the last 3 to 4 years, Jackson. Maryland typically starts hot and then fades late. Now they have been better. They have been better as a whole in recent
They
time.
always do that crap.
Well, and I think part of the reason is they don't schedule great in the non-conference, so they maybe put together a little bit of a faulty or phony record. So they're typically got a great record heading into October. The problem is they've played in the East. So once you hit the East, then you're playing Ohio State and Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State. So I think that's part of it. I don't know what their schedule looks like this year, but I do think that's been a little bit of an issue fading late. So Iowa getting them in November might not be a bad thing.
Well, it just screams trap game written all over it. But I will say anything can happen in the crazy world of college football. But
Hey,
like you said, go ahead.
I was gonna say, imagine they're they're sitting in a position where hey, you win these last two and you are 10-2. I mean, if they're 8-2 heading into that game, it's like okay, hey, that is a trap game because I mean I don't even know if they call it a trap game, but a scary game because I think two
Uh,
wins maybe get you into the playoff. And 8-2 is not unreasonable at all. It's not like us sitting here saying, "Oh, they might be undefeated heading into that game." We've said that in the past, just to kind of, I don't know, speculate about the possibility of a 12-0 run in a playoff appearance. But hey, 8-2 might put you in a position. I don't know where they'd be in the poll at that point in the season. They'd probably be sniffing the top 20, and then two more wins could potentially get you there. What I think will be interesting, not to change the subject, what I think will be interesting is see what the committee does with the third Big Ten team and the third SEC team. In other words, the team that does not make the championship game, because so there's four teams right there. Assuming those four teams that are in the two championship games get in, and then you're gonna have a team from the Big 12. You're gonna have a team from the ACC. I would assume that the third best team is going to get in, but how do you like if it's Iowa and Penn State? Well, if it's Iowa Penn State and they don't play each other and they're both 10-2, what's the criteria for figuring out who gets in? Does a Big Ten maybe get four in? Those are going to be the interesting conversations I think once we hit mid-November, so yeah, that easily could be a big game late.
I think the strength of victories could be one of the criterias, but we'll definitely wait and see what happens. And Joey says, "Great guest, Jackson. Cory is the man. Hey, he's one of the best there is.
Well, I
He's one of
appreciate
my
that.
favorite." Hey,
I
you're my
appreciate
favorite
that from both
Iowa
of you guys.
Hawkeye insider, that's for sure.
Well, I don't know about insider, but talking head, yes, talking head. I appreciate that too as well, Joe. I do appreciate that, and yeah, we've got. It's been slow. I mean, we talked about how busy it is. I have not been probably taking advantage of the Caitlin Clark WNBA stuff. Like I could probably be posting content every day on that, Jackson, and be getting a ton of traffic to the channel. Part of me like just needs a break. I'm the kind of guy I
That's
just
okay.
need a hiatus a little bit. So, not that I've been doing nothing as it relates to the platform, but we will have more recruiting stuff here very soon, and we've got the show with Mark every Tuesday at 4:30 Central Time. So we'll be back here in a few hours. Myself and Mark Rogers talking Hawkeyes, and I don't know exactly what's on the board. We've been doing our top five players from a certain position group during the Ferentz era here in recent times. So last week we did quarterbacks. Week before I think we did wide receivers. So I think we're doing running backs this week, and there hasn't been a lot of news, but we are going to start talking to opponent people. So I think we've got Levi Stevenson, who's our Iowa State guy, either this week or next. So people love hearing from him. They get riled up when Levi comes on there and starts touting the Cyclone spirit. So that should be fun.
I'm glad that the Iowa State rivalry's got more recognition. Like, it's funny though, we saw College Game Day go to town in 2019 and 2021. And you even had a former president come over to the Iowa State game last year. Wonderful. I wonder if we'll see like all the presidential candidates go to the Iowa State game. Just be like, it's the greatest game in history of college football. And then one candidate just goes, "Oh, I remember this game. I saw from 1958." Sir, they didn't play in 1958.
Well, we'll see. They play in September, so yeah, that's going to be a pretty busy time for the presidential candidates. Yeah, I did see that. I was at that game in September in Jack Trice. Wonderful game. I don't know. You said talk about recognition. It's never going to be as illustrious as Alabama Auburn or USC
Right.
UCLA or certainly Ohio State Michigan. But it
Notre
is a
Dame
great.
USC.
What's that?
Notre Dame USC.
Yeah, another great one. It's a great rivalry, and it's a great college football rivalry. And the people that haven't been to it just don't know what they're missing. I really do believe that. This year it's in Iowa City. I like it here in Ames because people that don't know, I broadcast from Ames. I live in Ames, so I'm kind of in the heart of I'm in the eye of the storm, literally. So it's a great rivalry, and I just hope. Part of me doesn't want Matt Campbell to be at Iowa State long because I do think he's obviously made them more relevant than they had been in recent time. But at the same time, the strength of the sport in this town and in this state is so much better when both those teams are good. And Iowa State's got some hype. You got to get an Iowa State guest on your show, Jackson, because they got some people returning. They got the quarterback back. They've got some really solid skill position players. That's Abu Sama at running back is a name to watch for. He is an absolute stud at running back. So that should be a fun game in September. Second game of the season for the Hawks.
Well, I will say though, I'll be making sure I make some plans for week 2 because I've got a Christmas list of people I'm gonna see if I can get on here. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
And last question before we go. Well, last 2 questions. How do you feel about Pat Anger becoming the new radio analyst? And will you see a Brada's Branded Thoughts episode with Caitlin Clark? Because if there isn't, I'll make sure I'll be posting for a petition. Be like, hey, let's get Caitlin Clark to come on the talk with Cory Brada. Because I'll be honest, I saw Good Morning America talking with her, and I'm like, that's not right. They suck at this.
Well,
I
I'll
want to
tell you.
see the great Cory Brada. Cory Brada could do a better job than them.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I'll say this.
I'd say what I mean.
This is probably gonna be a negative mark against me. I've never requested Caitlin Clark to be on the show, and I think part of that is
Oh.
she was such a hot ticket item when she was at Iowa. I'd love to have Caitlin on, obviously, As it relates to Pat Anger, I think the biggest thing with Pat Anger is whenever I've listened to Pat Anger in the past, first of all, great Hawkeye athlete. His NFL career was cut short due to injury, unfortunately, but um, just a great ambassador to the sport. He's got a little bit of a potty mouth, so he's not going to get away with that, on the airwaves. So he's going to have to figure out how to talk the way he talks, probably at his 9 to 5 job. Last I knew, he was working financial services, I think, in Eastern Iowa. But he's been in Eastern Iowa, loves Bettendorf, and I know one of the things Gary Dolphin talked about heading into the season, or heading into the process, I should say, the off season, and heading into the process of trying to replace Ed Podolak, was, hey, let's get a defensive guy from the Kirk era. We had Ed Podolak, who was a former running back, way before Kirk Ferentz time at Iowa. Let's get a guy from the Kirk era who plays defense, plays in the stronger side of the ball, and they did that. So I'm happy for Pat. I'm not a guy who listens to a ton of AM radio anymore. I feel ashamed saying that, given the fact that I did work briefly in that industry. But I am happy for Pat, and he is a all-time Hawkeye, and was part of a really fun couple of years back during 2008, 2009, and so I'll be anxious to hear him on the radio.
It's gonna be fun seeing what happens with him at the helm at the Iowa radio. But I will say though, if he wants to cuss up a storm, I bet you he'd be happier doing that at the Pat McAfee show, promoting his name out, telling everybody about, hey, I'm calling this game on the Iowa radio network.
Isn't that funny that you got two former Colts? They were teammates, Pat McAfee and Pat Anger. They both share a first name, and they both are a little rough around the edges. And you got Pat Anger, who his last name is Anger. So, anyways, it's just the irony and all of it. I find those things curious.
Yeah, just don't let Burt Kreischer crash the party. Like, don't let him do that like he did with CJ Stroud if that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's the machine. Good grief. You just don't do that to somebody. That's a no-no. But for those who would like to tune in to From the Hawkeye of the Storm and Iowa Football, The Voice College Football, and did I get this right? It's the 150th edition of Hawkeyes Live. Is that right?
I think so, yeah. I think it's the 150th show tonight. So,
oh, man.
Congratulations. I gotta check back. Are we wasting that show on Levi Stevenson of Iowa State? But yeah, no, in all due respect, I love Levi, but 150 shows. So been with Mark a long time.
It's gonna be awesome, and I'm definitely looking forward to it this afternoon. I'll be making sure I tell everybody to tune in. So come on in and check it out at 4:30 p.m. Central Time on Iowa Football at the Voice College Football, as Cory Brada and Mark Rogers bring you the latest in Iowa football. You can also check him out on Iowa Football, Voice College Football. And let's get him to 10,000 subs From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. And let's get him to 3,000 or more on X. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also check out his podcast on Spotify and Apple, and much, much more. And of course, check out the merch store. And as for me, you can also tune in tomorrow night for my next episode of the Jacksonian with Big Ten Ted, as we'll be going over our take on what's going on in the world of Big Ten football. Will we be seeing more conference realignment? Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it. And as for me, you can check me out and see what I got to say on YouTube at Jackson Johnson 979, where I'm 156 subs away from the magic number 500. You can check me out on X at Jackson09960335, and on Instagram and Threads at Jackson Johnson 543908. And in the meantime, y'all have a great rest of the morning. Thank you so much to Johnny O Show. Appreciate that very much. I'm just sorry that the internet cut out on me and Cory, but I got a lot of making up to do to Cory.
Appreciate you having me on, Jackson. It was fun.
Oh, thank you for coming on, man. I mean, you're one of the best. You're one of the best there is, man. And Joey says he did his 717th show with Mark last night. I wish I knew how many shows I'd done. But in the meantime, thank you for coming on. And thank you all for watching this edition of the Jacksonian. And for the next edition, let's just hope the internet doesn't do the mess around like it did earlier today. Y'all have a great morning. Y'all stay safe, stay cool, stay away from that heat, and put those sunglasses on.